Welcome, dear viewers. For more exclusive, thrilling stories every week, join our membership. Sit back, relax, and sip your coffee. Enjoy. I still see her face some nights. Emily Caldwell, age 8, gone missing near Tumbledown Mountain during a family camping trip. Search and rescue operations aren't supposed to end the way hers did, with me cradling what remained of a child while her parents' screams echoed through the pines. The official report said, animal attack. Black bear, most likely. The claw marks certainly suggested it. But bears don't arrange body parts in perfect circles. Bears don't leave handwritten notes folded into origami birds. And bears definitely don't whisper your name from the darkness 3 days after you found their supposed victim. That was 2 years ago. The incident that drove me from the Portland SR division to this backwater posting in Carabasset Valley, where the locals still use paper maps and talk about the woods like they're haunted. Turns out they might be right. My name is Mike Hutchins, former Army Ranger, former Portland PD, current search and rescue coordinator for the western Maine mountain region. After Emily, I couldn't stomach the city anymore. Too many reporters, too many knowing looks. So I took the transfer, bought a cabin on the outskirts of town, and tried to forget. The locals welcomed me with the reserved politeness Mainers are famous for. Neighborly, but not nosy. Old Bill Crowley at the general store threw in extra hand warmers with my purchases. Sarah at the diner memorized my usual black coffee, 2 eggs over easy sourdough toast within a week. They were good people, but they had boundaries. Don't go up past Caribou Pond after dark, Bill told me once, apropos of nothing, while ringing up my thermal socks. Just good advice. I'd nodded, chalking it up to local superstition. Maine's full of that. Old wives' tales about woods that date back to when the Abenaki thought these forests were inhabited by spirits. Quaint, I thought. Then came the Davison incident last month. Family of 4, tourists from Massachusetts, reported missing after failing to return from a day hike on the Appalachian Trail near Saddleback Mountain. Standard operation, I thought. Until I found the father, Marcus Davison, wandering barefoot through a stream, hypothermic, babbling about rules and wrong faces. 3 days later, we recovered his wife and children. What was left of them anyway. Official report. Exposure and wildlife predation. The kind of thing that happens when unprepared hikers get lost. Happens all the time. Except for the matchbooks placed in each of their mouths. Except for the symbols carved into the trees surrounding them. Not trail markers. Nothing I recognized. And except for the fact that when I interviewed Marcus Davison in the hospital later, he was completely lucid. And he told me something I'll never forget. There are rules in those woods, Officer Hutchins. They gave me a list. I followed them. My family didn't. He died that night. Heart failure, the doctor said. Natural causes. The next morning, I found a sealed envelope on my front porch. No postage, no address. Just my name written in flowing script that looked eerily similar to Marcus Davison's handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 7 numbered rules and a handwritten note at the bottom. You'll need be soon. The woods are waking up again. When they call for you, come prepared. I almost burned it. Should have. Instead, I folded it carefully and tucked it into my jacket pocket, where it sat like a stone against my chest. 2 days later, my radio crackled at 3:17 a.m. A group of college students missing in the Bigelow Preserve. As I dressed in the dark, I felt the paper rustling in my pocket. I knew somehow that this search would be different, that I would need those rules. What I didn't know was that following them would change everything I thought I understood about these woods, about what really lives here, and about what happened to Emily Caldwell 2 years ago. My name is Mike Hutchins, and these are the rules I follow when I search for the lost in the Maine woods. The Bigelow Preserve is beautiful in a way that makes you feel small. Ancient spruce and fir trees reach toward the sky like cathedral spires, while Flagstaff Lake stretches out blue and vast to the north. In daylight, it's a postcard. At night, with sleet hammering down and visibility reduced to the weak cone of my flashlight, it was a maze designed to swallow people whole. I pulled my truck into the West Flagstaff Road trailhead parking lot at 4:23 a.m. 2 other vehicles were already there, Ranger Collins's Green Forest Service pickup and Sheriff Wade's cruiser. Their breath clouded in the beam of my headlights as they huddled near the trailhead map. "Hutchins." Sheriff Wade nodded as I approached. He was a squat, ruddy-faced man with 40 years of Maine winters etched into the lines around his eyes. Got 4 missing from Maine Farmington. Came up for some overnight stargazing on Avery Peak. Only 1 made it back. "What's their status?" I asked, pulling on my gloves. Collins handed me a steaming thermos cap of coffee. Girl who made it back is Terry Washburn, sophomore. Hypothermic but stable. Got transported to Franklin Memorial an hour ago. Says they split up after something wrong started following them on the trail. "Wrong how?" Sheriff Wade's mouth tightened. "She said it looked like Professor Kinney, but walking funny and calling to them using their full names, which apparently the real Kinney never does." My hand drifted to my jacket pocket where the folded paper sat. The missing students? Aiden Broderick, Zoe Kim, and James Larrabee. Collins read from his notepad. Plus Professor Kinney himself. Last seen near Myron Avery's summit around 11 p.m. I unfolded my topographical map, tracing the most likely paths with my finger while my mind raced. The paper in my pocket seemed to grow heavier. "You 2 start up the Fire Warden's trail," I said. "I'll take Horns Pond route and meet you at the peak. Radio check every 30 minutes. They nodded, gathered their gear, and headed for the trailhead. I waited until their flashlights disappeared into the tree line before I pulled out the paper. The rules were written in a spidery, uneven hand. 1. If you hear your name called, count to 7 before responding. If the voice is still there, you may answer. If it's gone, keep moving. 2. Trails marked with red blazes are safe until sunrise. After that, only follow blue. 3. If you find someone wandering alone who claims to be lost, ask them what day it is. If they give the wrong answer, do not offer to help them find their way. 4. Animals should not stand perfectly still. If you see one that does, walk backward slowly until you can no longer see it. Then run. 5. If you smell wet copper and pine sap together, you have 1 minute to climb as high as you can off the ground. 6. The moon should only be visible through the trees. If you can see it clearly in a clearing, it's not the moon. Don't look directly at it. 7. If a member of your party begins walking backward or sideways, they are no longer your responsibility. Leave them immediately. I stared at the list, my breath forming ghosts in the freezing air. This was insanity. Yet something about those rules resonated with fragments of stories I'd heard around town. Old Bill's warnings, whispers at the diner when hikers went missing, the things Marcus Davison had said before he died. I folded the paper and tucked it back into my pocket. Then I grabbed my pack, checked my GPS, and headed up the Horns Pond trail. The sleet had changed to snow, falling in thick, silent flakes that muffled all sound. My headlamp carved a tunnel through darkness and swirling white. The temperature had dropped below 20 degrees. Dangerous conditions for lost hikers without proper gear. 2 miles in, my radio crackled. "Collins to Hutchins, you copy." I reached for my radio, then froze. Rule number 1 flashed through my mind. If you hear your name called... But this was Collins. On a radio, I could hear the static. "Hutchins here," I replied. "We've found a backpack at the fire warden's junction. Belongs to the Kim girl. No sign of her. Over." "Roger that. I'm about 2 miles in. Nothing yet. Over." I continued climbing, the trail steepening as it wound through dense spruce. The snow was falling faster now, already accumulating on the ground. Fresh powder covered any tracks the students might have left. Around 5:30 a.m., the gray light of false dawn began filtering through the trees. That's when I first heard it. A faint call from somewhere off-trail to my left. "Hello? Anyone there?" A man's voice, shaky with cold or fear. I stopped, training my light in that direction, but saw only trees and undergrowth. "This is search and rescue," I called back. "Identify yourself." "Oh, thank God," the voice replied, closer now. "It's Professor Kinney. I got separated from my students." Relief flooded through me. 1 found, 3 to go. I moved toward the voice, pushing through snow-laden branches. "Stay where you are, Professor. I'm coming to you." I broke through into a small clearing and spotted him, a tall, thin man in a blue parka, his back to me. "Professor Kinney?" He didn't turn, but his head cocked slightly at my voice. "You found me. Good. I need help finding my students. James, Aiden, and Zoe." We were at the summit when something strange happened. Rule 3 slithered into my mind. Ask them what day it is. "Professor, what's today's date?" He remained motionless, still facing away. "Why does that matter? My students are missing." A chill that had nothing to do with the cold slid down my spine. "Just checking if you're oriented after being out all night," I said, keeping my voice steady while slowly reaching for my sidearm. "What's today's date?" He turned then, but stopped halfway, his face in profile. Something about the angle of his neck wasn't right. "It's the day they wake up," he said, his voice suddenly different, deeper, with an odd resonance like multiple voices speaking together. "It's the day you learn what really happened to Emily Caldwell." My blood froze. I hadn't told anyone in Carabasset about Emily. The figure that wasn't Professor Kinney began turning the rest of the way around. I didn't wait to see its face. I ran. I crashed through the underbrush, branches whipping my face as panic drove me forward. Years of training told me to stop, to orient myself, but the voice that wasn't Professor Kinney's had triggered something primal in my brain. Pure, animal fear. After several minutes of blind running, I staggered to a stop, lungs burning in the cold air. I bent over, hands on my knees, and fought to regain control. My headlamp illuminated swirling snow and my own ragged breath clouding before me. "Get it together, Hutchins." I pulled out my GPS. In my panic, I'd veered west off the Horns Pond Trail. Not critically lost, but not where I needed to be. I took a deep breath and checked my compass to reorient. That's when I noticed the blazes on the tree beside me, bright red paint marks standing out against the bark. Rule 2. Trails marked with red blazes are safe until sunrise. After that, only follow blue. Dawn wasn't far off, maybe 20 minutes. I scanned the woods and spotted another red blaze about 30 yards ahead, not a trail I recognized from any official map. But right now, safe sounded pretty good. I followed the red blazes at a jog, checking over my shoulder every few seconds. The marks led me on a winding path through increasingly dense forest, up a gradual incline. The snow was falling heavily now, accumulating quickly on the ground and creating a disorienting whiteout effect in my headlamp beam. After 10 minutes of following the mysterious trail, the trees suddenly thinned, and I found myself at the edge of a small clearing. In the center stood a cabin I'd never seen on any Forest Service map, a crude single-room structure with dark windows and a steeply pitched roof now blanketed in fresh snow. I approached cautiously, weapon drawn. "Hello? Search and rescue. Anyone inside?" No response. The door hung slightly ajar, a thin line of blackness separating it from the frame. I pushed it open with the barrel of my flashlight. The interior was sparse: a wood stove, a rough wooden table, a single chair, and a narrow cot against the wall. No signs of recent occupation, but no dust either. The place felt maintained. On the table lay a single item, a handheld radio, older than mine but similar in design. I picked it up and checked the frequency. It was set to the same channel we were using for the search operation. I pressed the talk button experimentally. "This is SAR Officer Hutchins. Does anybody copy?" The radio crackled to life immediately. "Mike?" Thank Christ. It was Sheriff Wade's voice, tight with tension. "Where are you?" "Collins is down. Something's out here with us." "I found a cabin," I said. "Not on any map." "What happened to Collins?" "He..." Wade's voice cut off in a burst of static. When it returned, he was whispering. "Something that looked like one of the missing kids approached us. Collins went to help. Jesus, Mike, it opened up. Like a goddamn coat. Collins is still screaming somewhere, but I can't find him." My mouth went dry. "Wade, listen to me. Ask anyone you encounter what day it is. Don't help anyone who gives the wrong answer." "What are you talking about?" "Just trust me. I'm going to try to reach your position. Where are you?" "Near the summit of Avery's West Peak. But Mike, don't..." His voice dissolved into static again. Outside, the first rays of true dawn were breaking through the trees, painting the snow-covered ground with pale gold light. Sunrise. I remembered Rule 2 again. Red blazes safe until sunrise, then only blue. I hurried outside and circled the cabin, searching for any blue trail markers. There, on a massive old birch about 50 yards to the north, a blue blaze, faded but visible. I started toward it, then stopped dead. Something was moving through the trees to my right. A deer stepped into view about 30 yards away. A normal white-tailed deer, common in these woods. But it wasn't moving like a deer should. It stood perfectly still, facing me, even as the wind gusted and snow swirled around it. Rule 4. Animals should not stand perfectly still. If you see one that does, walk backwards slowly until you can no longer see it. Then run. I began backing away, keeping my eyes on the motionless deer. Its head was too still, like a taxidermist's mount. No breath steamed from its nostrils despite the freezing temperature. As I retreated, the deer's head rotated toward me, just its head, while its body remained frozen in the same position. Something about its eyes wasn't right. Too large, too dark, too aware. Once I'd backed far enough that the trees obscured my view of it, I turned and sprinted toward the blue blaze. I didn't look back until I'd reached it, and found the next marker, pushing deeper into the woods, following a trail that seemed to climb steadily toward Avery Peak. The forest grew stranger as I ascended. The trees here were old, ancient really, with gnarled trunks and branches that seemed to reach for me as I passed. The snowfall had eased, but a heavy mist had taken its place, limiting visibility to about 20 yards in any direction. I checked my watch. 7:23 a.m. The students and Professor Kinney had been missing for over 8 hours now, in temperatures well below freezing. Even with proper gear, hypothermia would be setting in. I needed to find them, the real them, fast. The blue blazes led me to a stream crossing. In summer, it would have been an easy rock hop, but now the stones were slick with ice and snow. I tested each step carefully. Halfway across, I heard it, a soft, rhythmic sloshing from upstream. I killed my light and crouched low on a midstream boulder. Through the mist, a figure emerged, wading down the center of the stream. It moved with a jerky, uneven gait, like someone operating a marionette without understanding how joints work. Even from a distance, I could see it wasn't right. Too tall, limbs too long, head lolling at an impossible angle. It wore what looked like standard hiking clothes: jeans, boots, a red parka, the clothing of a college student. "Hayden?" I called out, immediately regretting breaking my cover. The figure stopped. Slowly, its head swiveled 180 degrees to face me, though its body still faced upstream. The face was that of a young man, maybe 20, with glasses and a patchy beard. But the expression was all wrong. Blank, like a doll's face. "You know me?" it said, voice flat, yet somehow surprised. "You know Aiden Broderick." I raised my weapon. "What are you?" The thing that wasn't Aiden tilted its head at an angle that would snap a human neck. "I'm learning him," it said. "Come closer. Help me learn better." "Where is the real Aiden?" "Inside," it said, and its chest began to twitch and ripple beneath the parka. "Want to see?" I backed away, keeping my gun trained on it. "Where are the others, Zoe and James, the real Professor Kinney?" "All learning," it said. Its mouth stretched into a smile that extended literally from ear to ear, the skin at the corners tearing audibly. "Soon we'll all wake up. We've been sleeping so long under the mountain." "What are you talking about? What's under the mountain?" "The old ones. The hollow people. The long hunger." It took a jerky step toward me. "We need to practice being you. It's been so long since we walked outside." I fired a warning shot into the air. "Stay back." The thing stopped, head cocking at an impossible angle. "Bullets don't work on borrowed skin, Mike Hutchins. We know this. We tried with Emily Caldwell." My blood ran cold. "What do you know about Emily?" "She was delicious," it said, smile widening impossibly. "Her fear was so bright, like yours is now." Its chest began to split open, the parka tearing as something dark and glistening pushed through from inside. The snow hit me then, wet copper and pine sap, overwhelming and immediate. Rule 5. If you snow wet copper and pine sap together, you have 1 minute to climb as high as you can off the ground. I scrambled backward, nearly losing my footing on the icy rocks, and leapt for the shore. My mind raced. There were no tall rocks nearby, no easy climbing trees within reach. The thing in the stream let out a noise that wasn't quite a laugh as its chest continued to split open, revealing a mass of writhing darkness inside the shell of Aiden Broderick. Desperate, I ran to the largest tree nearby, an ancient pine with low, sturdy branches, and began to climb as fast as I could, my boots slipping on the snow-covered bark. Below me, I heard the wet, slithering sound of something large dragging itself out of the stream. I didn't look down. I just climbed, branches tearing at my clothes, bark scraping my hands raw. I climbed until my muscles screamed, until I was 30 feet above the ground with nowhere higher to go, the upper branches too thin to support my weight. Only then did I look down. What I saw at the base of the tree still haunts me. At the base of the tree stood what remained of Aiden Broderick, or rather, the shell that had been wearing his skin. The red parka lay in tatters around a glistening mass that pulsed and shifted like oil in water. It had no definite shape, flowing and reforming constantly, but somehow maintaining a vaguely humanoid silhouette. From its surface, dozens of thin, whip-like tendrils extended outward, probing the snow and trees around it. The thing that had emerged from Aiden's skin had no face that I could discern, but it seemed to sense me nonetheless. It circled the tree slowly, tendrils reaching upward but falling well short of my position. After several minutes of this strange patrol, it shuddered violently, collapsing in on itself until it was half its previous size. Then, with a sound like wet leather stretching, it began to change. Bones formed within the oily mass, human bones, assembling into a skeleton before my eyes. Organs bloomed around them, followed by muscle and sinew. It was building a body from scratch, constructing a human form like someone following an instruction manual without understanding the purpose. Last came the skin, flowing over the newly formed body like paint. When it finished, a perfect replica of Aiden Broderick stood at the base of my tree, fully clothed in the reconstituted remains of his hiking gear. Only his eyes were wrong, totally black, without whites or irises. "Better," it said in Aiden's voice, more natural sounding than before. "I'm learning." I remained frozen in the tree, my hands cramping from their death grip on the icy branches. My service weapon was still holstered at my hip, but the thing had already told me bullets wouldn't work. "What do you want?" I managed to ask, my voice barely steady. The Aiden thing tilted its head, the movement more fluid than before. "To wake up, to walk again, to feed." It gestured at the surrounding forest. "This was ours before your kind came. The Wabanaki knew. They stayed away from the Hollow Mountains." "The Hollow Mountains," I repeated. "You mean Bigelow, Avery Peak?" It nodded, a small, pleased smile forming on its stolen face. "You're smarter than the others, Mike Hutchins. Yes, we sleep inside. But sometimes we wake when the stars align, when the doors between thin, when blood is spilled in the right places." "Like Emily Caldwell," I said, the pieces clicking together. "Someone killed her as a sacrifice." The thing grinned wider. "The old man who lives in the yellow house. He knows the old ways. He gave us the girl. Now he's giving us more." It pointed roughly southeast. "The others are there, the gathering place. The door is almost open." A cold certainty settled in my gut. Bill Crowley, the general store owner. The Aiden thing didn't confirm or deny, just continued smiling that too-perfect smile. I thought quickly. If this thing wanted me dead, it could probably reach me regardless of how high I climbed. It was talking to me for a reason. "Why are you telling me this?" Its black eyes blinked slowly. "Because you have a choice to make, Mike Hutchins. Help us or join us. The old man promised us bodies, young, strong bodies to learn from. But you could be more. You could be a guide. A guide to what? To the others. To the easy prey." It gestured vaguely toward Carabasset Valley. "Show us how they think, how they move, how they hide. Help us hunt." The offer turned my stomach. "And if I refuse?" The thing's face hardened, smile vanishing. "Then you're just food, like Emily Caldwell, like the students." It paused, head tilting. "Time's up. Decision now." My mind raced. I needed to buy time, to find a way out of this impossible situation. "I need to see them first," I said. "The students, Professor Kinney. If they're still alive, I want to see them." The Aiden thing considered this for a long moment, its black eyes unblinking. Then it nodded. "Follow," it said, turning and walking into the forest without looking back. I hesitated, then slowly descended from the tree. Every instinct screamed at me to run in the opposite direction, but I couldn't abandon the missing students if there was any chance they were still alive. And I needed to know what Bill Crowley had done. The thing that wore Aiden's skin moved with unnatural grace through the forest, following a route that didn't correspond to any trail on my map. I checked my GPS. We were heading east, toward the saddle between Avery and West Peak. The snow had stopped entirely, leaving behind a pristine white blanket that made tracking our passage trivially easy. If anyone was looking for us, they'd have no trouble following. If anyone was still looking. The thought of Sheriff Wade and what might have happened to him after our radio contact went dark weighed heavily on me. After 20 minutes of silent hiking, we reached a small, sheltered basin between the two peaks. In the center of the natural depression stood a circle of stones, not random boulders, but deliberately placed, weathered megaliths that looked impossibly ancient. They reminded me of smaller versions of Stonehenge, worn by centuries of Maine winters. The doorway, the Aiden thing said, gesturing to the stone circle. The old people knew. They built it to keep us in. Now it lets us out. Within the circle, 3 figures knelt in the snow, backs to us. Even from behind, I recognized the distinctive purple jacket Zoe Kim had been described as wearing, and the lanky frame of who I assumed was James Larrabee. The third, larger figure would be Professor Kinney. "Are they alive?" I asked, taking a step closer. For now. The Aiden thing's voice had changed subtly, a strange resonance underlying the human tones. The door needs life to open fully. Blood keeps it from closing. I moved closer, circling to see their faces. What I saw nearly stopped my heart. All 3 knelt in identical postures, eyes open but vacant, expressions slack. From their slightly parted lips, thin, translucent filaments extended, connecting to the ground at the center of the stone circle. The filaments pulsed rhythmically, and with each pulse the kneeling figures twitched slightly, synchronized like puppets. Where the filaments entered the ground, the snow had melted in a perfect circle, revealing dark, rich soil that seemed to breathe, rising and falling in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. "What are you doing to them?" I asked, unable to mask the horror in my voice. "Drinking," the Aiden thing said simply. "Their fear, their memories, their essence. We need to understand before we can wear them properly." I reached for my sidearm, but the Aiden thing moved with blinding speed, catching my wrist in a grip that felt like iron. No, it chided. "I told you. Bullets don't work on borrowed skin." "Let them go," I demanded. "They're innocent." "Nothing is innocent," it replied. The old man understood. A few lives for the safety of many. That was the bargain the first people made. A few sacrifices to keep us sleeping. He's just honoring the old ways. A few sacrifices. Like Emily Caldwell. Like these students. My free hand went to my pocket, fingers brushing the paper with the rules. I needed a way out, a way to save these people. Suddenly, a distant cry echoed through the basin. Human, terrified, and familiar. Sheriff Wade. The Aiden thing's head snapped toward the sound. Its face rippled, momentarily losing cohesion before reforming. Others come. Unexpected. It released my wrist and strode to the edge of the stone circle, head cocked as if listening. I used the moment to move closer to the kneeling students, examining the filaments connecting them to the breathing ground. They looked almost like spider silk, glistening with moisture, but pulsing with an internal light that shifted from blue to green to purple. On impulse, I reached for my knife. If these things were feeding on the students through these connections, perhaps severing them would free them. Before I could draw my blade, the Aiden thing whirled back toward me. "No!" it hissed, moving with that unnatural speed again. But this time, I was ready, sidestepping its lunge and drawing my knife in one fluid motion. I slashed at the nearest filament, the one extending from Professor Kinney's mouth. The knife passed through it like it was made of air, having no effect whatsoever. The Aiden thing laughed, a horrible sound that echoed wrongly in the basin. Physical tools can't touch the threads of consciousness, Mike Hutchins. Only blood freely given can break the connection. My mind raced back to the rules. There had to be something, some clue about how to fight these things. The distant cry came again, closer now. The Aiden thing's expression darkened. "Time's up," it said. "Choose now. Guide us, or join them." I looked at the kneeling figures, their life literally being drained away into the earth. I thought about Emily Caldwell and the horrific way she died. I thought about Bill Crowley, selling out tourists and strangers to feed these ancient horrors. "I'll help you," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. The Aiden thing's face split in that too-wide smile again. "Good choice. First lesson starts now. Tell us about the one who comes, the loud one." "Sheriff Wade," I said, playing for time. "He's armed, dangerous, but he trusts me. I can bring him to you." The thing nodded approvingly. "Go, bring him. We'll prepare a place for him in the circle." I turned as if to leave the basin, mind frantically searching for a plan. I couldn't abandon these people, but I had no idea how to fight these creatures or free their victims. As I reached the edge of the basin, I glanced up at the sky. Through a break in the trees, I could see the full moon, impossibly large and bright against the morning sky. Wait. Full moon? In broad daylight? Rule 6 flashed through my mind. The moon should only be visible through the trees. If you can see it clearly in a clearing, it's not the moon. Don't look directly at it. Too late, I realized my mistake. I'd looked directly at the false moon, and a wave of dizziness immediately washed over me. The world tilted sideways, colors inverting briefly before snapping back to normal. When my vision cleared, I wasn't standing at the edge of the basin anymore. I was kneeling inside the stone circle, a slick, transparent filament extending from my own mouth into the breathing earth below. I couldn't move. Not my arms, not my legs, not even my eyes. My body had become a prison, my mind the only thing still free. Panic surged through me, but even that remained trapped within, unable to manifest as increased breathing or racing heart. I was frozen, a living statue. The filament extending from my mouth pulsed with sickly light. With each throb, I felt memories being pulled from me. My childhood in Augusta, my military service, Emily Caldwell's death, each extracted like teeth from unwilling gums. The pain wasn't physical, but something deeper, more fundamental. These things were drinking my essence, my very self. The Aiden thing sauntered into my field of vision, that horrible smile still plastered across its stolen face. "See? Much easier this way. No need to convince you now." It crouched down, bringing its face level with mine. "Your memories taste interesting. So much guilt, so much fear. Delicious." Behind it, the ground in the center of the stone circle continued to rise and fall, like breathing lungs. With each exhalation, a fine mist of crystalline particles floated upward, hovering momentarily before being drawn back down. It reminded me of underwater footage I'd seen of sea anemones, feeding on microscopic organisms. The Aiden thing stood and walked to the edge of the circle, tilting its head as if listening. Your friend comes closer. The loud one. His fear precedes him. Sheriff Wade. If he walked into this clearing unprepared, he'd end up just like us. I strained against my invisible bonds, fighting with everything I had to move, to shout a warning. Nothing happened. Don't waste energy, the Aiden thing said without turning. The connection is complete. Only blood freely given can break it now. It paused, head cocking further. He brings others. Many footsteps. Others? A rescue party? My hopes rose marginally. Then again, what could ordinary search and rescue personnel do against these things? The Aiden thing seemed unconcerned. It returned to the center of the circle and knelt beside the breathing earth. Placing one hand on the soil, it began to speak in a language I'd never heard. Guttural sounds interspersed with clicks and whistles no human throat could produce. The breathing ground responded, its rhythm increasing. The filaments connecting us to it pulsed faster, and with each pulse, more memories were torn away. I felt myself growing hollow, pieces of my identity vanishing one by one. A sound like cracking ice emanated from beneath us. The soil at the center of the circle split, revealing a narrow fissure that widened steadily. From within the growing crack, a thick, gray mist began to rise, not like normal fog, but something that moved with purpose, coiling and reaching like tentative fingers. "The door opens," the Aiden thing said, switching back to English. "The sleepers wake." The mist continued to pour from the fissure, pooling around our kneeling forms. Where it touched exposed skin, it left behind a crystalline residue that sparkled in the morning light. The sensation was like thousands of tiny needles pricking my flesh, but even this pain remained trapped inside my paralyzed body. Voices approached from beyond the basin, Sheriff Wade's distinctive baritone, plus others I didn't recognize. The Aiden thing hissed in annoyance. "Too soon," it muttered. "The door is not fully open." It stood and circled us, its movements becoming more erratic, less human. The stolen face of Aiden Broderick began to ripple and shift as its concentration wavered. "Hide," it decided, gesturing toward the mist. Immediately, the gray fog thickened, rising until it obscured everything within the stone circle from outside view. Through the swirling mist, I saw Sheriff Wade enter the basin, accompanied by 4 forest rangers in their distinctive green uniforms. They moved cautiously, weapons drawn, sweeping the area with tactical precision. "Hutchins," Wade called. "Collins, you out here?" The Aiden thing smiled that terrible smile. It raised one hand, and the mist parted slightly, just enough to give the search party a clear view of us kneeling in the circle. "Help!" it called in a perfect imitation of my voice. "Over here! I found them!" Wade and the rangers turned toward the sound, squinting through the mist. "Hutchins, is that you?" The trap was set. Once they entered the circle, they'd be taken just like us. I fought desperately against my paralysis, focusing every ounce of willpower on moving something. Anything. A finger, an eyelid, my lips. And then I remembered. Rule 1. If you hear your name called, count to 7 before responding. If the voice is still there, you may answer. If it's gone, keep moving. Wade was cautious by nature. He knew these woods and their dangers. If he followed that rule, even unconsciously. "Hutchins," he called again, taking a tentative step forward. 1. The Aiden thing smiled wider, gesturing for the mist to part further. 2. Wade and 2 rangers moved closer, while the other 2 rangers circled to the left and right. Standard search and rescue protocol. 3. "Hurry!" the Aiden thing called with my voice. "They're alive but fading fast." 4. Wade paused, something like suspicion crossing his weathered face. "Mike, what's your status?" 5. The fissure in the center of the circle widened further. The mist was thickening, solidifying into forms that were almost humanoid but wrong. Too tall, too thin, limbs at impossible angles. 6. "Mike?" Wade called again, taking a step back. "Report." 7. The Aiden thing's smile faltered. "We found the missing students," it called, still using my voice. "Need medical assistance immediately." But Wade was already backing away, raising his hand to signal the Rangers to hold position. "That's not Mike," he said quietly, but in the unnatural stillness of the basin, his words carried clearly. Mike always reports status first, then situation. The Aiden thing hissed in frustration. Its face rippled violently, features melting and reforming. "Too late," it growled, its voice now a distorted version of Aiden's. The door opens, the sleepers wake. The fissure in the earth tore wider with a sound like mountains splitting. The gray mist erupted upward in a geyser of writhing tendrils. Where they touched the stone megaliths, frost formed instantly, spreading in crystalline patterns. "Fall back!" Wade shouted to the Rangers. "Get out of the basin!" Too late. The mist surged forward with impossible speed, engulfing two of the Rangers before they could retreat. Their screams cut off abruptly as they vanished within the gray cloud. Wade and the remaining Rangers opened fire, bullets cutting through the mist without effect. The Aiden thing laughed, the sound echoing wrongly. "Physical weapons cannot harm us," it declared. "We are the Hollow Ones. We are hunger given form." As the mist advanced on Wade and the remaining Rangers, something unexpected happened. A bright orange flare arced through the air, launched from somewhere beyond the basin's edge. It landed in the center of the stone circle, directly in the widening fissure. The reaction was immediate and violent. The mist recoiled as if burned, tendrils writhing in what could only be pain. The fissure began to close, edges of soil drawing together. A second flare followed, then a third, each landing within the circle and burning with unnatural intensity. The mist retreated further, condensing around us, the kneeling sacrifices. Someone new entered the basin. A small, elderly woman with steel gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore a park ranger's uniform that looked decades out of date and carried a shotgun that appeared almost as old as she was. "Iron and fire," she shouted to Wade. "They hate iron and fire. Drive them back to the circle." Wade didn't question. He grabbed something from his belt, road flares, and with them, tossing them in a perimeter around the stone circle. The remaining Rangers followed suit, creating a ring of blazing red light. The gray mist shrieked, a sound no fog should be able to make, and pulled back entirely into the stone circle, condensing around our kneeling forms. The old woman approached the edge of the circle, stopping just outside the stones. She reached into her pocket and withdrew a handful of what looked like iron nails, rusted with age. "Blood freely given breaks the bond," she said, looking directly at me. "Remember the rules, Officer Hutchins. Blood freely given. Rule 5 had mentioned climbing when snowing copper and pine. Rule 3 warned about helping the lost who didn't know the date, but nothing specifically about blood, unless the paper itself. The rules that had appeared mysteriously on my porch after Marcus Davison's death. The note had been signed in what looked like blood. The old woman began tossing iron nails into the circle, one by one. Where they landed, the mist hissed and retreated. The Aiden thing's face contorted in rage. "Ranger Catherine," it snarled. "Still interfering after all these years." 58 years, the old woman, Catherine, corrected grimly. 58 years protecting these mountains from your kind. Did you think I'd stop now? The Aiden thing circled us like a predator, its movements growing increasingly frantic as more iron nails landed within the stone circle. The gray mist continued to retreat, condensing around the fissure at the center. "You can't stop it this time, Catherine," the thing snarled, its voice fluctuating between Aiden's and something much older, much deeper. "The alignment is perfect. The sacrifices are ready. The door is opening." Ranger Catherine moved slowly around the perimeter of the circle, careful not to cross the boundary marked by the standing stones. Her eyes, sharp despite her years, never left the Aiden thing. "I've stopped it before. I'll stop it again." She tossed another nail into the circle. Bill Crowley should have known better. Should have remembered what happened in '67. The Aiden thing hissed. The old man serves us now. Has served us for decades. Did you think you were the only one who remembered? While they faced off, Sheriff Wade and the two remaining rangers had positioned themselves around the circle, creating a perimeter with their flares. The bright, chemical light pushed the mist further back, confining it entirely within the stone boundary. "Catherine," Wade called, never taking his eyes off the scene. "What the hell are we dealing with?" "The Hollow Ones," she replied, her voice steady despite the tension evident in her stance. "They live inside the mountains, sleep for decades, sometimes centuries, wake up hungry." "Like skinwalkers?" one of the rangers asked, voice trembling slightly. Catherine shook her head. "Worse. Skinwalkers were once human, at least. These never were." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small glass vial containing what looked like dark, dried blood. "They're what the Wabanaki called the Winnogan, the Hollow Hunters. They wear bodies like we wear clothes, discarding them when they are damaged or no longer useful." The Aiden thing laughed, the sound like stones grinding together. "Such knowledge for a human. Did your grandfather teach you that before we took him? Catherine Blackwell?" A flash of pain crossed the old woman's face, but her hand remained steady as she uncorked the vial. "My grandfather died protecting these mountains from you. I'm just continuing the family business." Inside the circle, I remained paralyzed, a helpless witness to the confrontation. The filament connecting me to the breathing earth continued to pulse, but slower now, as if the entities were diverting their attention to the more immediate threat. I could feel my sense of self eroding with each pulse, memories being consumed and digested by whatever lurked below. The students beside me were in worse shape. Zoe's eyes had clouded over completely, turning milky white. James had begun to twitch uncontrollably, his body fighting the paralysis even as his consciousness was being devoured. Only Professor Kinney seemed relatively intact, though his skin had taken on an ashen pallor. Catherine circled until she stood directly across from Wade. Their positions, Catherine, Wade, and the two rangers, formed a rough square around the stone circle. The old woman raised the vial. "Remember the rules, Officer Hutchins," she called to me. "Blood freely given breaks the bond. Iron contains. Fire repels. What cannot be killed can be bound." The Aiden thing suddenly lunged toward Catherine, moving with that unnatural speed. It stopped abruptly at the circle's edge, as if hitting an invisible barrier. It screamed in frustration, its face melting and reforming rapidly. "You think your perimeter will hold?" It sneered. The doorway widens. More come. As if in response to its words, the fissure at the center of the circle cracked wider. The gray mist swirled more violently, and within it, shapes began to form. Tall, spindly silhouettes with too many limbs, moving with the jerky, disjointed motions of poorly operated marionettes. Catherine locked eyes with Wade. "When I give the signal, throw everything you've got into the circle. Every flare, every iron nail, every silver coin you're carrying. Anything metal. Understand?" Wade nodded grimly. Catherine turned to me. "And you, Officer Hutchins, when you feel the pull lessen, you need to move. Fast. Get the others out of the circle if you can, but don't hesitate. Don't look back." She began to chant in a language I didn't recognize, not the guttural sounds the Aiden thing had used, but something more melodic, flowing like water over stones. With each phrase, she sprinkled droplets from the vial onto the ground just outside the circle. The effect was immediate. The earth where the blood, if that's what it was, touched began to glow with a soft, amber light. The light spread, tracing the circumference of the circle, connecting the standing stones with a luminous thread. The Aiden thing howled, its form destabilizing further. The stolen face of Aiden Broderick sloughed away like melting wax, revealing the pulsing, oily darkness beneath. Your blood is weak, Catherine Blackwell. Too old, too thin. Not my blood, Catherine replied, a grim smile tugging at her weathered face. My grandfather's, preserved with salt and iron for just this purpose. The amber light completed its circuit around the circle, flaring brighter. Within the circle, the gray mist retreated further from the perimeter, condensing into a churning column above the fissure. The partially formed shapes within it writhed in what looked like pain. The filament connecting me to the earth faltered, its pulsing growing erratic. I felt a lessening of the paralysis, a tingling returning to my extremities. Now! Catherine shouted. Wade and the Rangers began hurling their remaining flares into the circle. At the same time, Catherine flung the last of the blood from the vial directly at the column of mist. The world exploded into chaos. A howl, like 1,000 tortured voices, filled the basin, echoing off the mountainsides. The column of mist convulsed violently, tendrils lashing outward in all directions. The flares ignited something within the mist itself, setting off chemical reactions that painted the scene in strobing blues and greens. In that moment of confusion, I felt the paralysis break entirely. The filament connecting me to the breathing earth snapped with an audible pop, dissolving into shimmering particles. I collapsed forward, catching myself on hands suddenly alive with pins and needles sensation. "Move!" Catherine's voice cut through the cacophony. "Get out of the circle!" I scrambled to my feet, legs shaky but responsive. To my left, Professor Kinney also stirred, the filament connecting him having broken as well. But Zoe and James remained kneeling, still connected, still being drained. A decision point. Catherine had said to get out, not to look back. But I couldn't leave the students. I lunged for Zoe first, grabbing her around the waist and pulling backward with all my strength. For a moment, nothing happened. It was like trying to move a statue anchored to the ground. Then something gave way, and we both tumbled backward. The filament stretched thin, then snapped, dissolving like mine had. The column of mist shrieked again, a sound that made my teeth vibrate in my skull. Tendrils shot from it, whipping toward us with vicious intent. "Hutchins, move!" Wade shouted, firing his service weapon into the mass of mist. The bullets passed through harmlessly, but the mist recoiled slightly from the sound. I dragged Zoe toward the edge of the circle, her body limp but breathing. Professor Kinney had already made it out, helped by one of the Rangers. That left James. I turned back. The tendrils of mist had wrapped around James entirely now, his form barely visible within the writhing gray mass. The Aiden thing, or what remained of it, had melted back into the central column, its borrowed humanity completely abandoned. Catherine appeared at my side, her ancient shotgun leveled at the column. "Too late for that one," she said grimly. "Get out while you can." The fissure in the earth was closing now, the edges drawing together like a healing wound. The column of mist compressed, darkening to the color of a storm cloud. Lightning-like discharges crackled within it. "It's retreating," Catherine said, satisfaction evident in her voice, falling back into the deep places. But the battle wasn't over. As the fissure narrowed, the mist grew more frantic. Tendrils shot out in every direction, seeking escape. One wrapped around my ankle before I could react, burning cold even through my boot. I cried out, trying to shake it off. Catherine didn't hesitate. She aimed her shotgun and fired directly at the tendril. Instead of buckshot, the shell discharged what looked like iron filings, glittering in the morning light. Where they struck the tendril, it sizzled and released me, retreating back to the main mass. Iron and salt, Catherine explained, reloading with practiced efficiency. Oldest remedy there is. The fissure had narrowed to a crack now, and the column of mist was being drawn into it like water down a drain. The howling had faded to a low, angry hum that vibrated in my chest. The Aiden thing was nowhere to be seen, presumably reabsorbed into the greater mass. But James still knelt at the center, the filament connecting him now thicker than before, pulsing with dark energy. His body jerked and twitched, head lolling unnaturally. "We can't leave him," I insisted, moving back toward the circle. Catherine caught my arm in a surprisingly strong grip. "Look at his eyes." I did. James's eyes had turned completely black, like pools of oil, and when his head turned toward us, the movement was all wrong, fluid but unnatural, like a snake rather than a human neck. "That's not James anymore," Catherine said softly. "They've hollowed him out." As if confirming her assessment, James's body rose to its feet with jerky, marionette-like movements, his head tilted at an impossible angle, and when his mouth opened, the voice that emerged was not human. "We will return," it said in a chorus of overlapping tones. "The door is marked, the key is turned. Next time, Catherine Blackwell, you won't be here to stop us." The remaining gray mist swirled around him, encasing him in a cocoon of writhing tendrils. When it dissipated seconds later, both James and the mist were gone, the fissure sealed completely beneath undisturbed soil. The stone circle stood empty, save for the scattered flares still sputtering on the ground. The oppressive atmosphere that had permeated the basin lifted, replaced by the normal sounds of the forest. Wind through pine needles, distant bird calls, the crunch of snow underfoot. Catherine lowered her shotgun, shoulders sagging with either relief or exhaustion, probably both. "It's over, for now." Wade approached cautiously, keeping his weapon at the ready. "Would someone like to explain what the hell just happened?" "Later," Catherine said, turning toward where the Rangers were tending to Zoe and Professor Kinney. "First, we need to get these two to safety. And then..." Her eyes hardened as she looked at me. "We need to pay a visit to Bill Crowley." I nodded, my mind still reeling from everything I'd witnessed. "The rules," I said, pulling the crumpled paper from my pocket. "You wrote them, didn't you?" Catherine's weathered face broke into a tired smile. "Not me. My grandfather. I just made sure they find their way to those who need them." She nodded toward the paper. "Keep that close. We're not done yet. Not by a long shot." I looked back at the stone circle one last time. For a brief moment, I thought I saw a flicker of movement within it, a gray shadow passing between the stones. But when I blinked, it was gone. As we carried the survivors out of the basin, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever we'd encountered, the Winogan, the Hollow Ones, were merely retreating, not defeated. And somewhere in the depths of the mountain, James was with them, or whatever remained of him. The rules had saved us this time. I had a feeling we'd need them again soon. The ride back to Carabasset Valley passed in weighted silence. I sat in Wade's cruiser, Catherine beside me in the back seat. My hands wouldn't stop trembling, delayed shock setting in as the adrenaline ebbed from my system. Professor Kinney and Zoe had been airlifted to Franklin Memorial Hospital, both still unconscious, but stable. "We need a plan," Wade finally said, breaking the silence as we descended into the valley. "I can't just walk into Crowley's store and arrest him for..." "What exactly? Sacrificing hikers to mountain monsters?" Catherine made a sound that might have been a laugh if it contained any humor. "No one's arrested a Crowley in this valley for 3 generations. They're protected." "Protected by who?" I asked. "By what?" she corrected. "The Hollow Ones have been sleeping under these mountains for centuries. The original settlers made a pact, sacrifices in exchange for safety. The Crowleys have been the keepers of that pact since the beginning. Wade's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. So we're talking about generations of murders covered up by the whole town. Not the whole town, Catherine said. Most folks around here don't know the specifics. They just know certain places are dangerous after dark. Certain trails you don't take. Certain rules you follow. The cruiser slowed as we approached the outskirts of town. And your family? I asked. Where do you fit in? Catherine's weathered face hardened. We were the opposition. The Blackwells never accepted the pact. We've been fighting it since my great-grandfather's time, finding ways to bind the Hollow Ones, to keep them sleeping. She patted the shotgun across her knees. Every generation, one of us takes up the watch. And no one stopped the Crowleys before now. She shook her head. Can't prove what happens in the deep woods. Bodies get blamed on animal attacks, exposure, accidents, and the benefits are too good. Benefits? Wade asked. Prosperity. Protection. Carabasset Valley hasn't had a major natural disaster in 150 years. No floods, no devastating fires, no disease outbreaks. Even the big blizzard of '52 somehow skipped right over us. Her eyes had a distant look. The pact works, in its way. That's why it's continued. We pulled into town just after noon. Main Street was quiet. A few locals going about their business under the weak winter sun. Crowley's general store sat at the far end, a weathered clapboard building with a hand-painted sign, an American flag hanging limply in the still air. What's our move? Wade asked, parking across the street. Catherine checked her shotgun. We confront him. Make him understand the Hollow Ones are getting stronger. The old sacrifices aren't enough anymore. They want to wake fully, to walk outside their mountains. And if he doesn't cooperate? I asked. Her eyes met mine, hard as flint. Then we end a very old arrangement. Wade frowned. I can't condone vigilante justice, Catherine. This isn't about justice, she replied. It's about survival. We crossed the street together, an unlikely trio, the sheriff in his mud-spattered uniform, the ancient ranger with her even more ancient shotgun, and me, still wearing the torn and bloodied clothes from my encounter in the stone circle. A bell jingled cheerfully as we entered the store. The interior was dimly lit and smelled of leather, coffee, and wood smoke. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with everything from canned goods to fishing tackle to homemade jams. At the back, a pot-bellied stove radiated welcome heat. Behind the counter stood Bill Crowley himself, wiping down the ancient cash register. He looked up as we entered, his friendly shopkeeper's smile fading as he registered who had come calling. Catherine, he said, voice carefully neutral. Been a while. Not long enough, Bill. Catherine's shotgun wasn't raised, but she made no effort to conceal it. Crowley's eyes flicked to Wade, then to me, lingering on my torn jacket and the dried blood on my hands. I see you've met our visitors, Officer Hutchins. The Hollow Ones? I said. Yeah, we got acquainted. Right after they tried to drain me dry in your little stone circle. Something like genuine regret crossed Crowley's face. You weren't supposed to be involved. Just the students. Outsiders. Nobody who'd be missed around here. Wade stepped forward, hand resting on his sidearm. William Crowley, I should arrest you right now for the disappearance of James Larrabee and attempted murder of Zoe Kim and Professor Kinney. Crowley's smile returned, sad and knowing. On what evidence, Sheriff? You really want to start that process? Ask yourself how many of your predecessors knew about the arrangement. Ask yourself why nobody's interfered all these years. Wade's jaw tightened, but he didn't draw his weapon. Crowley turned to Catherine. "It has to be done. You know that better than anyone. The hollow ones must be fed, or they wake hungry. Would you rather sacrifice a few strangers or watch them hollow out the entire valley?" "There were alternatives," Catherine snapped. "My family found ways to keep them bound without blood. Your family chose the easy way." "The effective way," Crowley corrected. "Your grandfather's binding wore off. Always does. Blood is the only permanent solution." I stepped closer to the counter. "Tell me about Emily Caldwell." Something flickered behind Crowley's eyes. Caution, maybe even fear. "What about her?" "The thing wearing Aiden Broderick's skin said she was delicious. Said her fear was bright." My voice remained steady, though my hands had curled into fists. "It said you gave her to them." Crowley's shoulders slumped slightly. "I didn't choose her specifically. Sometimes they have preferences. Children's fear is stronger, purer. It sustains them longer." The admission hit me like a physical blow. I surged forward, grabbing him by his flannel shirt. "You son of a bitch, she was 8 years old." Wade pulled me back while Crowley adjusted his collar, unfazed. "I take no pleasure in it, Officer Hutchins. But the arrangement must be maintained. One child every few years means hundreds survive. The math is simple." "And Marcus Davison?" I asked. "The father who survived while his family died?" Crowley nodded. "Sometimes they like to leave one alive. A witness who no one will believe. It amuses them." He gestured to Catherine. "Ask her. She knows their ways better than anyone." "The alignment is stronger this year," Catherine said, ignoring his deflection. "You felt it too, didn't you? That's why you escalated from 1 victim to 4. Crowley didn't deny it. "The stars are right. The door wants to open wider than before." "They took James Larrabee completely," I said. "They're wearing him now, learning from him. The Hollow One said next time, they'll be ready." For the first time, genuine alarm showed on Crowley's face. "Took him? Completely?" He shook his head. "That's never happened before. They've always just fed and retreated." "Things are changing, Bill," Catherine said. "The old arrangement isn't working anymore. They're getting stronger, more ambitious." Crowley moved from behind the counter, pacing nervously. "That's not possible. My grandfather spoke with them directly, made the terms clear. Blood for protection. They never take more than agreed upon." "Well, they just did," Wade said flatly, "and they nearly took Officer Hutchins and 2 others with them." Crowley stopped pacing, his face suddenly ashen. "If they're breaking the arrangement." He didn't finish the thought, but fear had replaced his earlier confidence. Catherine stepped forward. "We need to reinforce the bindings. All of them. Every circle, every doorway on the mountain." "There are more stone circles?" I asked. 7 in total," Crowley confirmed. 1 for each peak in the Bigelow Range. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. "If they're truly waking, truly breaking the arrangement, then we're all in danger," Catherine finished. The bell above the door jingled again. We all turned to see Sarah from the diner entering, a covered dish in her hands. "Brought you some of that apple cobbler you like, Bill," she said cheerfully, then froze as she registered the tension in the room. "Everything okay here?" Crowley forced a smile. "Just fine, Sarah. Sheriff's asking about some missing hikers." Sarah nodded, setting the dish on the counter. "Those college kids." Her eyes found mine. "Heard you were up on the mountain all night searching, Mike. Any luck?" Before I could answer, Catherine stepped forward. "Sarah, how long have you lived in the valley?" Sarah blinked at the non sequitur. "Born and raised. Blackwell, right? You used to run the Eastern Ranger Station." "Still do," Catherine said. "Tell me, Have you noticed anything strange lately? Unusual animal behavior? People acting odd?" Sarah's friendly expression faltered slightly. "Well, now that you mention it, old Jenkins's dog won't go near the tree line anymore. Just sits and howls if they try to walk him up there. And my nephew said he saw someone walking backward through the playground at night last week. I told him it was just his imagination, but..." Rule 7 flashed through my mind. If a member of your party begins walking backward or sideways, they are no longer your responsibility. Leave them immediately. Crowley and Catherine exchanged significant looks. "It's starting already," Catherine said quietly. Crowley nodded, any pretense of denial gone. "They're pushing at the boundaries. Testing." "Testing for what?" Wade asked. "Full awakening," Catherine said grimly. "They don't want sacrifices anymore. They want to hunt freely again, like they did before the settlers, before the Wabanaki, before anyone lived in these valleys." Sarah looked between us, confusion evident. "What are y'all talking about?" Crowley made a decision. He moved to the door, flipped the open sign to closed, and locked it. "Sarah, you might want to sit down. There are some things about this town you need to understand." "We don't have time for a history lesson," Catherine objected. "The bindings need to be reinforced before nightfall." "She needs to know," Crowley insisted. "Everyone in town needs to know. If the Hollow Ones are breaking the arrangement, no one is safe anymore." He turned to me. "Officer Hutchins, did you bring the rules with you?" I pulled the crumpled paper from my pocket. "Right here." "Good." Crowley's eyes were deadly serious. "You're going to need them. We all are." Outside the window, the afternoon sun slipped behind a bank of clouds, casting the street in premature shadow. In the distance toward the mountains, a thin gray mist was rising, though there wasn't a hint of rain in the forecast. "It's beginning," Catherine whispered. Bill Crowley's back room could have belonged to a museum of local history or a paranormal investigator's office. Shelves groaned under the weight of leather-bound journals dating back to the 1800s. Maps covered one wall, the Bigelow Range marked with symbols I didn't recognize. Glass cases displayed artifacts, stone arrowheads, iron nails with strange markings, vials of dark substances. "The family archive," Crowley explained, pulling a dusty tome from a shelf. "Every Crowley for 7 generations has kept records." Catherine snorted. "Records of your betrayals." "Records of our survival," Crowley countered without heat. "Not all of us had the luxury of moral high ground, Catherine. Some of us had to make the hard choices." Sheriff Wade was on his radio, coordinating with his deputies to quietly gather the town council for an emergency meeting. Sarah sat in a corner chair, her face pale but composed as she processed everything she'd just learned about her hometown. "So all those missing hikers over the years?" Sarah said quietly. "Not all were sacrifices," Crowley clarified, spreading a map on the table. "The mountains are dangerous in ordinary ways too, but yes, some were chosen." "By you," I said, unable to keep the accusation from my voice. Crowley met my gaze. "I marked them, left signs the Hollow Ones recognized. I never physically harmed anyone myself." "That's a distinction without a difference," Wade growled, rejoining us after finishing his call. "Perhaps," Crowley conceded, "but it kept this town safe for decades." He tapped the map. "These are the 7 circles. Avery Peak, where you encountered them today. Old Speck, Sugarloaf, Crocker Mountain, Bigelow Mountain, and 2 more on unnamed peaks that don't appear on official maps." Catherine leaned over the table. "The Wabanaki called them the 7 Teeth, the places where the earth opens to what lies beneath." She traced a line connecting the peaks. Together, they form a containment boundary, As long as the circles are maintained, the hollow ones stay inside their territory. And when the circles fail? I asked. Catherine's face was grim. 1797. The Rangeley incident. 3 entire settlements disappeared in a single night. The survivors spoke of people walking wrong, of mist that followed them, of neighbors who weren't quite right anymore. She nodded toward the bookshelves. It's all on the records, isn't it, Bill? Crowley nodded reluctantly. My ancestor was the only Crowley to survive. He helped establish the arrangement afterward. I studied the map, noting the distance between peaks. We can't possibly reinforce all 7 circles before nightfall. We don't need to, Catherine said. The breach is at Avery. That's where they are pushing hardest. Secure that one, and we buy time for the others. What about the town? Sarah asked. If these things are waking up, everyone needs to know how to protect themselves. Wade nodded. Council meeting in 1 hour at the town hall. Everyone with authority to spread the word will be there. They won't believe it, Crowley warned. Not without proof. Then we'll give them proof, I said. The hospital isn't far. We bring Professor Kinney here if he's conscious. Let him tell them what he saw. Catherine had moved to a glass case, examining the artifacts inside. We'll need supplies. Iron, salt, flares. She turned to Crowley. And blood. Crowley's mouth tightened. There's a freezer in the cellar. My grandmother's blood, preserved with the old methods. Potent. Your family's blood works better than others, Catherine acknowledged grudgingly. Part of your pact. A dubious honor, Crowley said dryly. I'll fetch it. Sarah, would you help me carry things up from the cellar? As they disappeared down a trapdoor behind the counter, Wade turned to Catherine. You really believe all this? Magic blood and ancient pacts? Catherine fixed him with a level stare. You saw what happened on that mountain, Sheriff. What would you call it? Wade had no answer. I pulled out the rules paper again, studying the 7 directives that had saved my life. These rules. They're not just for survival, are they? They're weaknesses, ways to identify the hollow ones, ways to evade them. Catherine nodded. My grandfather compiled them after 60 years of fighting these things. Each one represents a lesson learned in blood. She touched the paper gently. Keep that close. We'll need to make copies for everyone. My phone buzzed. Service had returned now that we were back in town. It was the hospital. Professor Kinney is awake, I reported after a brief conversation. Disoriented but stable. He's asking for me specifically. Go, Catherine said decisively. Find out what he remembers, what he knows. We'll prepare here. I'm coming with you, Wade said, keys already in hand. I want a statement from him about what happened up there. We left Catherine examining the maps while Sarah and Crowley gathered supplies from the cellar. The sky had darkened further during our time in the store. Unnatural storm clouds gathering over the mountains. The air felt charged, like just before a lightning strike. At Franklin Memorial Hospital, the halls were busier than usual. Nurses moved with hurried efficiency between rooms. In the waiting area, people sat with minor injuries, cuts, bruises, a broken arm. 3 car accidents this morning, the receptionist explained when Wade asked about the activity. And we've had 6 cases of sleepwalking injuries since last night. Full moon brings out the weirdness. Wade and I exchanged glances. The moon hadn't been full last night, and sleepwalking injuries weren't common in a town this size. Professor Kinney was in a private room on the 2nd floor. He sat propped up in bed, a bandage around his head, an IV in his arm. His skin retained that ashen quality I'd noticed in the stone circle, but his eyes were alert. Officer Hutchins, he said as I entered, his voice raspy. You found us. Just in time, it seems, I replied, taking the chair beside his bed. How much do you remember? He stared at his hands. Flashes. We were on Avery Peak, star watching. Then, something came from the trees. It looked like a park ranger, but wrong somehow. It called to us. Using your full names? I prompted. He looked up sharply. Yes. How did you know? Just confirming some details, Wade said, standing at the foot of the bed. Please continue, Professor. It separated us, somehow. I remember trying to keep the students together, but we got confused in the dark. His hands twisted the bedsheet. Then the mist came. Gray, thick. It herded us somewhere. A circle of stones. He shuddered. After that, just fragments. Being on my knees. Something feeding on me, taking pieces of myself away. And Zoe? I asked. Is she recovering too? Kenny nodded weakly. She's down the hall. Hasn't spoken yet. Just stares at the ceiling. I leaned closer. Professor, we need your help. These things, the hollow ones, they're waking up. Breaking an old arrangement. The town needs to hear what happened to you. What you saw. He recoiled. No, I can't. I can't think about it. I can't speak about it. People will die if you don't, Wade said bluntly. You don't understand. Kenny's voice dropped to a whisper. They're still with me, in my head, watching through my eyes, listening through my ears. What do you mean? They don't just take, he said, eyes wide and frightened. They leave pieces of themselves behind, like parasites, seeds. His hand moved to his chest. I can feel it. Here, waiting, growing. Wade took a step back, hand instinctively moving toward his sidearm. Are you saying you're infected? I asked carefully. Kenny nodded miserably. They're inside anyone who survived contact. Me, Zoe, you, Officer Hutchins. The bottom dropped out of my stomach. That's not possible. I feel fine. So do I, Kenny said, until the sun starts to set, until they stir. He looked toward the window where the strange storm clouds were darkening the afternoon sky. It's starting already. Can't you feel it? The pull, the hollow places inside, wanting to be filled. Now that he mentioned it, I had felt something. A strange emptiness. An echo where memories had been taken. I'd attributed it to shock, to exhaustion. How long? Wade asked. How long until whatever this is takes effect? Nightfall, Kenny whispered, when the mist rises. When they wake fully. He looked at me with desperate eyes. You have to lock us up. Me, Zoe, yourself. Anyone who made direct contact. Before we turn. Turn into what? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Hollow ones, Kenny said. New vessels. New bodies for them to wear while they hunt. A commotion erupted in the hallway, raised voices, something crashing to the floor. Wade moved to the door, peering out. What is it? I asked. Sleepwalking patient, Wade reported. But he hesitated. She's walking backward. Rule 7. If a member of your party begins walking backward or sideways, they are no longer your responsibility. Leave them immediately. My radio crackled to life. Catherine's voice came through tight with urgency. Hutchins, Wade. Get back here now. It's starting. The mist is moving into town from all directions. The barrier is breaking. Wade drew his weapon. We need to evacuate the hospital. Kenny shook his head frantically. No time. Lock down. Iron and salt at every entrance. It's the only way. I looked out the window. The premature darkness had deepened, and tendrils of gray mist were indeed creeping down from the mountains, sliding through the streets of Carabasset Valley like searching fingers. I'll coordinate the hospital lockdown, Wade decided. You get back to Catherine and Crowley. We need those supplies distributed now. What about you? I asked, thinking of what Kenny had said about infection. Wade met my eyes steadily. I didn't make direct contact with those things. You did. Be careful, Hutchins. Watch yourself when night falls. I nodded grimly, checking my watch. Just after 4 p.m., with sunset coming early this time of year. Maybe 2 hours of daylight left. 2 hours to prepare the town for the Hollow One's awakening. 2 hours before I potentially became one of them. I took one last look at Professor Kinney, who had curled into himself, rocking slightly and murmuring what sounded like mathematical equations, an attempt to keep his mind ordered, to resist the hollow spaces inside him. "I'll send help," I promised, then hurried into the gathering darkness. 3 months have passed since the night we call the Gray Siege. Most official reports blame it on a combination of factors: unusual weather patterns, mass hallucination from fungal spores, carbon monoxide leaks from faulty heating systems. The kind of explanations that let people sleep at night. Carabasset Valley knows better. 37 people died that night. Another 14 disappeared without a trace. 6, including myself, carry what Catherine calls the hollow seed. We survived direct contact, fought off the turning, but something of them remains inside us. On certain nights, when the moon sits just right in the sky, I can feel it stirring. The town has changed. Iron horseshoes hang above every door. Salt lines the thresholds of public buildings. Children recite the 7 rules in school alongside the Pledge of Allegiance. Sheriff Wade now carries iron bullets in his service weapon. Bill Crowley is gone, not dead. At least, I don't think so. He walked into the mist voluntarily that night, carrying 7 vials of his family's blood. By morning, the mist had retreated back to the mountains, and the immediate threat had passed. No one has seen him since. His sacrifice, if that's what it was, bought us time. Catherine believes he's renegotiating the arrangement from the inside, becoming a kind of ambassador to the Hollow Ones. I'm not sure what to believe. Catherine has moved permanently into town. She's training others now, passing down the Blackwell knowledge while she still can. Her health isn't good. Fighting off the Hollow Ones at her age took more from her than she's willing to admit. Zoe Kim returned to college in Farmington. She calls me sometimes, usually after midnight, to talk about the hollow spaces she feels inside herself. We're the only ones who truly understand what it's like. The others who survived contact have scattered, trying to outrun what can't be outrun. James Larrabee's parents still post flyers around town. They refuse to believe he's gone for good. Sometimes I see a figure at the edge of the tree line that has James's lanky build and distinctive walk. But it never comes closer, and I never approach. Professor Kinney took a sabbatical. Last I heard, he was researching ancient Wabanaki legends in the special collections at the University of Maine. Looking for answers, or maybe for weaknesses we can exploit when the Hollow Ones inevitably wake again. As for me, I still coordinate search and rescue operations in the western Maine mountains. But now, when hikers go missing near the 7 Peaks, I follow a different protocol. My pack always contains iron nails, road flares, and a printed copy of the rules. I've never returned to the stone circle on Avery Peak. I don't need to. In my dreams, I'm there almost every night, kneeling in the snow, feeling the filament connecting me to something ancient and hungry beneath the mountain. The rules saved us once. They might save us again, but rules can be learned, studied, and eventually broken. The Hollow Ones have all the time in the world. They're patient, they're adaptable, and they're still hungry. This morning, I found a folded paper bird on my front porch. Inside, written in what looked like Bill Crowley's handwriting, was a single sentence. They're learning new ways to wake. I keep the rules with me at all times now. I've memorized them, recite them like a prayer when I wake, gasping in the night. But I can't shake the feeling that they're no longer enough, that the hollow ones are adapting, changing their patterns to render our defenses obsolete, that soon we'll need new rules for the waking world. So if you find yourself in the Maine woods, in the shadow of the Bigelow Range, and you hear your name called from the trees, count to 7 before you answer, and pray whatever called you is gone before you reach the end. Some voices are never meant to be answered.